Fate has mysterious ways of making us realize whom we should truly trust and let stay in our lives. It was like that for Katie, a highly successful 35-year-old woman who discovered that she was being deceived by her sweet in-laws, who pretended to be poor, showing that they weren't who she thought. Katie lent them money for 3 months, but when she paid them an unexpected visit and heard them talking in the bedroom, she discovered what they had really done with the money. They made her cry. Katie was the owner of a highly recognized makeup brand in the United States, which made her a successful and consequently wealthy woman. And it's been 3 years since she married her husband Mark, whom she met at a party through a mutual friend. Mark, on the other hand, worked as an accountant in a small company, earning a much lower salary than his wife. Despite this context, there were no disagreements between the couple due to the difference in financial status. They genuinely loved each other, and that wasn't an issue for them, as they had built a great relationship over the years. Katie's parents passed away when she was a teenager after a sudden car accident, so the only maternal and paternal figures she had were Mark's parents, Helen and John, who treated her like a daughter from the first day they met. The couple would visit them a maximum of 2 times a year, since they lived in a more distant location, in a lakes region in Canada, and it was difficult for them to make the trip more frequently. But when they did go, they would stay at least 2 weeks in the cozy house where they lived. When they were about to organize the next trip to visit Mark's parents, he received a phone call from his mother saying that his father had been urgently hospitalized earlier in the week and his health was at risk. Mark put them on speakerphone. "Son, I don't want to worry you, but your father was rushed to the hospital. They discovered that he has throat cancer. I'm devastated, but I believe everything will be fine. I'm praying for that," the elderly woman said with sorrow. "What? Oh my God, Mom. We're coming there right now. Let me check the next flight. We'll be there soon, okay? Everything will be fine," Mark said while Katie quickly purchased the flight tickets. During the flight, Katie and Mark were worried, praying together, and trying to stay as calm as possible. When they arrived, Mark's father was already back home, under observation, lying in bed, coughing heavily, and that scene broke both Mark's and Katie's hearts. They were having breakfast in the kitchen with Mark's mother when she told the couple about her husband's health condition. "His situation is critical. We started the treatment yesterday, but we don't know if we can afford the total cost. I'm desperate, son. I don't know what to do," the woman said, trying to hide her tears. "My salary as a nurse and John's retirement won't be enough. I think we'll need to take out a loan from the bank. It's the only solution." "Don't worry, Mom. I'll help too. Dad will get better soon, no matter what we have to do for that." That's when Katie thought about offering to lend the money for the treatment, instead of her mother-in-law going to the bank, as that way they wouldn't have to pay high interest rates, and they could work out the best way to repay the loan over time. "Please, let me lend the money for John's treatment. It's the least I can do. You've always welcomed me so warmly. And this way, you won't have to deal with the exorbitant bank interest. We can figure out the best way for you to repay me later, but right now, the most important thing is John's health," Katie said, holding Helen's hand. Since there didn't seem to be a better option, Helen accepted her daughter-in-law's proposal, and they agreed to start the repayment 1 year after the beginning of the treatment, allowing Katie's in-laws to save up and pay back gradually. However, Katie had no idea what her in-laws were secretly planning. So she and her husband returned home, hopeful that John would improve with the treatment. Katie would deposit a sum of $10,000 into her mother-in-law's account for John's treatment, and it was like this in the 3 following months after the diagnosis. Mark's mother would call to update her son and daughter-in-law on the progress of the treatment, assuring them that everything was going well and that John's health was improving. always expressing deep gratitude to Katie whenever the opportunity arose. Due to John's health condition, Mark and Katie had decided to make an additional visit that year to provide more support to Mark's parents during this time. What Mark truly wanted was to be by their side until his father recovered, but he couldn't leave his job. At the end of the 3rd month of treatment, Mark and Katie traveled for their 2nd visit, feeling more at ease this time, especially after the feedback from Helen indicating that John was getting better. As usual, they were warmly welcomed by Helen, and John was already more active, although the dry cough persisted and he sometimes complained of throat pain. The first few days of the visit were delightful, almost like the old times before the terrible news. However, one night, when Katie left the room to get a glass of water, she overheard a conversation between her in-laws. "She doesn't even suspect a thing, dear. This is turning out to be easier than we thought. Keep up the coughing act. You're doing a great job," Helen said to her husband, and they laughed together. Katie couldn't believe what she had just heard. She decided to hide and make sure of what was happening, as it couldn't be true. "I'm even thinking of faking another illness to get more money from her. We only have 2 more 10,000 deposits left to pay off the cost of our boat, and I think this house needs some renovations," John said, mocking the situation. It was real. Katie's in-laws were pretending that John had cancer to use the treatment money to buy a boat. They had pretended to be poor, unable to afford the costs to cure John, while deceiving their own son and daughter-in-law. Mark certainly didn't know about the lie, as he was constantly worried about his father's health and had cried with his wife multiple times, fearing to lose him. It was truly an absurd situation that Katie would never have expected from an elderly couple who had always been so welcoming and kind to her. Katie felt nauseous after overhearing the conversation. Instead of returning to the bedroom, she sat in the living room, contemplating what she would do with that information, and cried out of sadness. Would it be a good idea to tell her husband? How could she even bring up such a thing, that his heroes were scam artists, greedy and deceitful? She needed to carefully consider how to proceed from there. After almost an hour, she went back to bed, determined to tell her husband everything the next day during their morning walk, away from the in-laws. So the next morning, while they were walking, Katie started the conversation cautiously. "Love, I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me. I would never lie to you or say something just to harm someone in this way." "Okay, tell me. I'm getting worried now," Mark replied. "Yesterday, when I went to get a glass of water in the middle of the night, I overheard your parents talking, and what I'm about to tell you is incredibly absurd. It's difficult, but I need to tell you the truth. I heard them mocking about buying a boat with the money meant for your father's cancer treatment. Your father doesn't have cancer. They're lying to both of us." "What? Katie, this can't be possible. I can't believe you're saying this. And why? Is it because of the cost of the treatment? They will pay you back every penny. I can't believe you're accusing my parents like this. I don't even know what to think. Mark, I would never make up something like this. I was devastated when I realized that's what they were discussing. They used the money to buy a boat. You have to believe me," Katie pleaded, fearing the consequences of all that confusion. Mark remained silent, with a lost look in his eyes. However, as smart as Katie was, she quickly came up with a solution to calm her husband down, and then later proved to him that she was telling the truth. "Look, let's forget I said anything. I think I must have misheard. I'm sorry, baby. I must have misinterpreted. And since we don't keep anything from each other, I decided to share it. But let's just forget about it." The couple returned home, and Helen was preparing lunch. But during their walk back home, Katie had an idea to try to expose her in-laws, deciding to take a controversial measure and act in secret. On that same day, she bought a baby monitor to place in her in-laws' room without anyone knowing. She hid it in a strategic yet secure spot, hoping that they would confess what they were doing while being recorded. She waited for an opportunity when everyone was distracted in the living room watching a movie and discreetly placed the baby monitor on the bookshelf in her in-laws' room. Luckily for Katie, it didn't take long for them to confess again that they were deceiving her and their son. During the night, they unwittingly revealed the truth. The following day, when they went out to the park to soak up some sun, Katie seized the chance to retrieve the baby monitor and see what had been recorded during the night. "Oh, John, I know it's strange, but she's filthy rich, has everything she wants, always had. We can't let our conscience weigh us down now. This pretending will be over soon, and they'll never know that we faked your cancer," said Mark's mother, using the words Katie needed to prove to her husband that she was telling the truth. Katie was extremely saddened by the whole situation. Her in-laws were like parents to her, always kind and loving. It didn't seem to make sense, but she knew very well that there were people like that, wolves in sheep's clothing, who took advantage of others discreetly, without any remorse. Many had tried to do that to her, but she never imagined her in-laws would be capable of such cruelty. Katie was certain that she needed to tell Mark so they could decide together what to do from there. So when they were ready to sleep, Katie sat on the bed with her husband and showed him the video. Mark listened in silence, and when it ended, he looked at his wife in shock. "I know it sounds crazy, my love. I could never have imagined they would do something like this, but it seems to be true. I don't know what to do. I want us to think together and find the best solution for all of this," Katie said, embracing her husband. "How could they do this to you and me? I'm their son. They're not like this," Mark said, incredulous. "I'm going to talk to them right away," he added before getting up and heading to his parents' room. "Tell me it's not true, that you are pretending that's cancer. I'm only going to ask once, and I hope that you don't make the situation even worse." Immediately, Helen burst into tears and tried to explain herself to her son. "No, son, you have to understand. We were desperate. Expenses had increased so much over the years, and we didn't know what else to do. We didn't think straight. Please understand our situation." Helen tried to lie once again. "Expenses? And the boat you bought," Mark dared to say, and then he knew they had indeed fabricated all the lies out of self-interest, not financial problems. Helen and John confessed to Mark that they bought the boat with the money sent by Katie and begged for their son and daughter-in-law's forgiveness. However, it was too late, and the young couple chose at that moment to simply go away. During the flight back, Mark and Katie stayed embraced, comforting each other. At one point, Mark held his wife's face and said, "You are the love of my life. I'm sorry for not believing in you. Thank you for taking care of me, for being generous and patient. I don't know how our relationship with my parents will be, but I don't want to think about that right now. I just want us to share good moments and keep growing together." "You don't need to apologize, babe. It's a very complicated situation, and it's natural for you to react this way. Don't worry about it. I love you very much, and we are in this life together. As for your parents, I think we need to let time decide what will happen." Mark was moved by his wife's words. Even after what her in-laws had done, she still believed in the possibility of reconciling with them in the future. On the other hand, his heart was broken, and he didn't know when a genuine reconciliation could happen. The couple ended up living 3 very happy years, nurturing the love they had for each other, with minimal contact with Mark's parents, who constantly tried to make amends and bridge the distance between them. Then, Katie became pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. On the same day their daughter was born, Katie held her in her arms and, looking deeply into her husband's eyes, said, "The time has come, my love. Let's give your parents a chance. I want them to meet our little girl." They seemed genuinely remorseful. Mark's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't bear the longing he felt for his parents, who had always been a blessing in his life before that senseless mistake. So they called Helen and John, who were in tears on the other end of the line, feeling an unimaginable joy at the possibility of reconciliation and the birth of their granddaughter. The elderly couple was really remorseful, and soon after their son discovered the truth and left their house that day, they sold the boat they had bought and returned all the money to their daughter-in-law. What Katie and Mark didn't know was that in addition to that, they had set up a savings account to pay for their granddaughter's education. As soon as they found out, they were trying to have a baby. Even though they hadn't been in much contact, the money in the savings account was a symbol of the remorse and love that Helen and John wanted to restore in the family. Even though Katie was capable of providing for their daughter's education, her in-laws wanted to contribute and be close to her and their son again. When Katie and Mark learned about this gesture, they felt a strong warmth in their hearts, which made them certain that the reconciliation should happen. Thus, Helen and John came to meet their granddaughter. Katie looked at the two of them with her daughter in her arms and said, "It's okay. We can leave the past behind. We are all prone to making mistakes, and the only thing we can do is try to make amends and not repeat them. And that's what you've done. We missed our family, and together we are much stronger. Besides, this little one needs love, and I know she will love you very much too." After that visit, the major mistake made by the in-laws truly became a thing of the past, and the family was reunited once again. Helen and John moved to the United States to be closer and witness the growth of their granddaughter. Today, the family remains united, stronger than ever, and Helen and John were able to make amends, which doesn't always happen. The truth is that Katie was a pure-hearted woman and was able to forgive them even before Mark. Everything turned out well between them, but it is essential to be very careful with the relationships that truly matter in our lives, because there are mistakes that may not be forgiven and consequences that are irreversible. Therefore, the best thing to do is to cultivate love and cherish those we hold dear before it's too late. If you know any similar stories, write about it in the comments. Like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.